In the heart of Sri Lanka's economic storm, where the winds of uncertainty blow, leaving scars of once thriving construction landscape. Jobs are scarce, opportunities few. The future uncertain. Yet, amid the chaos, architects refuse to be cowed. Their resilience shines brighter. The beacon of hope, they stand to carve out a path for the professionals to catalyze the nation's recovery, fortified by their unwavering belief in the transformative power of their craft. Resilience alone is not enough to traverse the treacherous terrain of adversity. Resourcefulness emerges as a guiding light. Architects are masters of innovation, with the particular focus on the environment as they strive to sculpt spaces, illuminating our path towards revival and renewal. Breathing life into the veins of our nation's economy by collaborating with entrepreneurs and change makers, merging their visions into a symphony of spaces and places that transcend the boundaries of their imagination. Together, they construct the narrative of our collective future, painting the bright canvas of sustainable development with the mission of reviving this nation. Architect 24 is our exploration into the ethics of our profession. Join us on this journey of discovery. Together, let's build a future that stands the test of time.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to each of you to the National Conference 2024 of the Sri Lanka Institute of Architects. My name is Trishma Pinto. It's my pleasure to be your host today. Ladies and gentlemen, today's forum is not just a gathering of our architectural fraternity. It's also a convergence of our visions and our ideas of the future of the architectural profession. As a stunning curtain raiser just revealed to you, the theme for our conference this year is resilience, resourcefulness, revival, the 3 R's. In the face of ongoing challenges, it is imperative that all of us as architects remain resilient and adaptive. Therefore, at this forum, over the course of this day, through insightful discussions, thought-provoking sessions, and engagement with esteemed experts, we aim to equip ourselves with the tools as well as the knowledge necessary to navigate these unprecedented times. We're honored that joining us here today, we have with us distinguished speakers and thought leaders from across the region, each who will be contributing their unique perspectives and expertise to enrich our understanding of the challenges and the obstacles that lie ahead. I'm sure it's going to be an impactful exchange of ideas and insights over the course of this day, and I hope you agree with me that we can't wait to get started. So with that, it's now time for us to officially commence our proceedings here at our national conference. We'd like to start off with the formal welcome address. To do the honors of delivering the same, it's my pleasure now to invite on stage the President of Sri Lanka Institute of Architects. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Architect Rohana Bandara Herath.
Good morning once again. President Acacia, Architect Saifuddin Ahmed, dear past presidents, my council colleagues, colleague architects, dear students, special invitees, and ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the SLIA, I wish to warmly welcome all of you to the grand stage of intellectual explosion. The 42nd National Conference of Sri Lanka Institute of Architects. As we gather the auspicious of architectural brilliance, the theme that echoes through the corridors of our collective conscious is none other than resilience, resourcefulness, and revival. This carefully chosen theme serves as a beacon, guiding us through the intricate landscape of our time, urging us to reflect, adapt, and emerge stronger than ever. I expect that this conference will unfold as a canvas where ideas will be brushed against the palette of discussions, creating strokes of insight and innovation. It is my fervent expectation and unwavering belief that this gathering will stand as a catalyst, sparking a much-needed analysis and synthesis of critical issues encapsulated within our chosen theme. With a constellation of celebrated speakers illuminating our proceedings, I have no doubt that this conference will be nothing short of masterpiece, a tapestry woven with threads of wisdom, insight, and inspiration. To each participant, I extend the promise that this experience will not be merely formative, but a transformative journey from which we will collectively draw a reservoir of unparalleled knowledge and experience. As we embark on this intellectual odyssey, let the camaraderie of ideas flow, the symphony of discussion resonate, and the architecture of thought build bridge towards a future that echoes the resilience of our past, the resourcefulness of our present, and the revival of our aspirations. May this conference be a chapter etched in annals of architectural excellence, a milestone where resilience meets resourcefulness, and through revival, we sculpt a future that stands tall in the face of challenges. I welcome you once again. Let us proceed with the 42nd successful National Conference organized by Sri Lanka Institute of Architects. Thank you.
We say thank you very much to our President, Architect Rohana Bandara Herat, for welcoming our audience as well as giving us a glimpse into what we can expect over the course of this day at our 42nd edition of this gathering. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure we've all been intrigued by a stunning curtain raiser that opened up this event for us today. Notably, that curtain raiser featured our students of architecture, who are, of course, the next generation of this profession. The curtain raiser revealed the theme for 2024, which, as you already know, is resilience, resourcefulness, and revival. To now tell us more about the theme, please join me now in welcoming on stage the chairperson of the National Conference. Please put your hands together for Architect Rajita Kanda-Oda Arache.
President SLIA, past presidents, council members, committee members, distinguished guests, sponsors, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to you all. I stand here today filled with gratitude and honor as the chairperson of 2024 Architects National Conference Committee. I extend my heartfelt thanks to President SLIA for bestowing upon me this significant role, and I am deeply grateful to the SLIA Council for their constant support and guidance. Our conference theme, RRR, Resilience, Resourcefulness, Revival, a formula for national recovery, was carefully chosen after thorough discussion with field experts. It speaks directly to our journey towards a brighter future for our nation, highlighting the importance of resilience in tough times, the need for resourcefulness with what we have, and the revival of our economy and society. We have structured our discussion around three key sub-themes. First one is conviviality and well-being, creating spaces where people can thrive and live meaningful lives. Second one is creative expression and innovation, exploring how architects can innovate and make the most of available resources. Third one is cultural engagement and community cohesion, emphasizing the restoration and stability of our communities. Our lineup of speakers is diverse and esteemed. We have renowned architects from across the South Asia, such as Professor Dr. Architect Jimmy Lim from Malaysia, Architect Beji Nkamkar from Bangladesh, and Architect Saumitra Ghosh and Architect Nisha Matthews from India. Additionally, we are honored to have our own talented Sri Lankan architects, including Tilina Vijayakon, Samantha Hevage, and Tilan Kottigoda sharing their experiences. Furthermore, we are privileged to host two distinguished scholars, Professor Devaka Veerakon and Dr. Ranil Senanayaka, who will provide invaluable insights alongside architect Upendra Randenia. They will shed light to our future physical plans up to 2048, revealing untapped resources that may have gone untouched. Throughout the conference, we will have keynote addresses, panel discussions, and opportunities for engagement with our speakers. We've also provided a platform for architectural students to share their ideas and perspectives. Our ultimate goal is not just to exchange ideas, but to drive real change and progress in our nation. This conference serves as a platform to our younger generation to rethink and explore with fresh ideas, and the knowledge shared and connections made are invaluable. I extend my sincere thanks to each of you for your attention and participation. Together, let's work towards shaping the destiny of our beloved Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our conference chairperson, that was architect Rajata Kamdaodarachi, for you sharing with us insights about the theme, as well as giving us a glimpse into the various highlights we can look forward to over the course of the day. On that note, we're ready now, ladies and gentlemen, to get started with our very first session, and I do hope you're all set and well prepared to be inspired, engaged, and educated by the interesting perspectives on offer from our elite set of experts today. So now, allow me to officially introduce our first session to you. Our first session is Resilience. This segment addresses environmental resilience of the built environment through creation of not only livable but delightful and sustainable spaces and places. Allow me now to introduce to you our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is Professor Jimmy Lim from Malaysia. Professor Dr. Architect Jimmy Lim returned from Sydney after 13 years of schooling and reading architecture at UNSW from 1964 to 1968. He is a member of the Royal Australian Institute of Architects, a past president of the Malaysian Institute of Architects from 1991 to 1993, and a founding member of the Malaysian Heritage Trust in 1984, better known as Badan Warisan Malaysia today. In 1972, he joined a local practice and was the architect in charge of many notable projects. By the time CSL Associates was established in 1978, Professor Lim had 5 years of working experience in Sydney and another 5 with Project Architect, a local practice based in Kuala Lumpur. During this time, much of his work was featured in magazines, books, and periodicals, and Professor Lim has been invited to public and private universities, both locally and internationally. In recognition of his work, he has won numerous awards from the Malaysian Institute of Architects, the Singapore Institute of Architects, Getz Award, the Norway Award, the New South Wales University Alumni Award, the Commonwealth Association of Architects Award, and the coveted Aga Khan Award in 1998. Ladies and gentlemen, with this introduction, it's now our pleasure to invite our keynote speaker to take stage. Please put your hands together for Professor Jimmy Lim.
Good morning. I'm completely bowled over by what I saw earlier. And I think the Sri Lankan Institute of Architects have given me tremendous confidence to know that architecture is well and doing well. And for that, I think there is a great future for architects. Congratulations to the Sri Lankan Institute of Architects for a fantastic job. And I hope you'll continue to do that. Now, I stand here today humbly trying to talk to you about resilience. Now, what do I know about resilience? We've never had any natural disaster in our country. We never had, in fact, in my country, it is just a land of honey and gold. Things are very good, but the architectural profession is not in such a good situation as the young ones coming up are not being groomed to be proud. When I watch the ceremony of your young architects marching up to receive their scroll, there's a sense of pride, a sense of purpose in what they are supposed to do. And I think that's what the architectural profession, not only in Malaysia, but globally, first with ASEAN and then globally. And I think maybe this is where Sri Lankan Institute of Architects can lead. And I say that again, and I mean it. So good on you. Now, I'm speaking to you from a position of an elderly architect. And in humility, I say this to you because I was president of the Malaysian Institute of Architects 35 years ago. So if at that time I was about 35, you add another 35 years now, I'm 70. So I do know a little bit of what goes on in the profession. So I think that's what's important. I've seen it all. I've seen resilience, problems of revival, and also to be resourceful. All of these are very easy words to utter, to articulate, but they are very difficult to be executed. So, I am not talking about architectural issues at the moment, but I will share with you my career. It has not been a peaceful, uneventful career as what a lot of people would expect. But architectural career is not necessarily a peaceful one. It's quite turbulent. First of all, you ask yourself, is architecture an art form or is it a business? When you're at the universities, they keep telling you about art, about design, about looks, about aesthetics, about your concepts, about your philosophies. All that disappears the moment you go out into the real world. Your client that you meet is going to ask you, what philosophy are you talking about? Why are you talking about your ideas? What about mine? What about my building? I'm putting up the building, not you, Mr. Architect. So why is it all your concept? What about my concept, my function? I'm only interested in the bottom line. The bottom line. And what's the ROI? ROI, for those of you who do not know, means return on investment. That means for every dollar he spends, he wants to know how much he's going to make on his investment, which you are going to design for him. That's the reality of architecture. And I think the sooner our young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed architects get to understand this point, then the profession will start to be the leader of the building industry. When I was president of PAM 35 years ago, the Institute was the leader of the building industry in Malaysia. We had a magazine called the Majalah Architect, which was then privatized so that the Institute could get some money. And there was a joke which they used to ask me every month before the magazine comes out. Who will you be scolding this issue? I said, why? He said, because the person that wants to advertise would like to have his page facing the editorial page. Now, I don't know, it's a very weird sense of humor that you want to read about who is being scolded. Well, apparently, most people read that article first. So if they want to know what's going on, they read that first, and that's when they see the advertisement. So from an advertising point of view, that's good news. Well, that's what it is. News, tragedies, sells and makes money. The war in Ukraine makes money. The war in Gaza makes money. What's happening in Malaysia don't make money. So that's what it is. Now, we have to now get the profession back on its feet. Okay, now resourcefulness as what I've tried to understand is if necessity is the mother of invention. It must follow that any disruption or obstruction has to be the fairy godmother of creativity. Now think about it. I'm sure all of you have heard of the story of Cinderella, how she was disadvantaged by her stepsisters. She tried to make a dress for herself to go to the ball, but she did not, but because it was all destroyed. So in the end, who came along to her rescue? Her fairy godmother. And the fairy godmother, out of nothing, created a coach with 6 white horses, footmen, the coachman, and all that, and gave her a fantastic gown with glass slippers and sent her off to the ball. And she was the main principal in the ball. So this advantage has a godmother as your creative person. Now, this is very important. Your own resourcefulness will see that you don't get down and out. I've had a lot of turbulence. I'll walk you through them afterwards just for laugh. Don't be too serious. I notice none of you are laughing, because normally, when you go to a seminar or anything, try to relax, enjoy yourself. If it's funny, laugh. If it's not funny, don't laugh. But, so express yourself. Architecture is to be enjoyed. Architecture is something to be suffered. You've got to enjoy what you're doing. So, revival. How do you revive yourself when you're in a situation of depression? This is what I call, you've got to set yourself the invisible intellectual ceiling. So at every stage of your career, every stage of your life, you treat that as a challenge to yourself. That at this point I've attained in life is actually the starting point of what you call the X and Y graph, 0. So every time you go up, when you come to a point, you move your X and Y up and make that 0 again. And so you're always starting from ground zero. And that's the IIC, the invisible intellectual ceiling. So at the end of the day, that is how you review and reinvent your life. So this is the total sum of your work is always a renaissance of what you started. And you always start from ground zero. Now, this is a milestone of my turbulent career. In 1966, I was involved in the Sydney Opera House protest. In 1973, when I was back in Malaysia, I had an encounter with the State Secretary of the Perak State. He was furious. In 1982, there was a monorail white elephant newspaper crisis with the mayor of Kuala Lumpur. In 1988, I appeared in the MasterCard ad, and this got the Board of Architects of Malaysia upset. Then in 1990, I wrote an editorial called Architects Classified. It was meant to be a joke, but a lot of the senior architects were very upset. They tried to see what I've written, whether it was libelous, but there was nothing libelous. It's all good fun. You got to have fun. Then, 1998, I won the Aga Khan Award for Architectural Excellence. And lo and behold, in year 2004, I have a baptism of fire. My office was burnt down. Then in 2015, there was a Botak Hill. Botak in Malay means ball. The ball hill destruction. I talk about it in the press. Then the chief minister of Penang sued me for 300,000 for libel. Then in 2015, everything is hunky-dory again. Pam awarded me the gold medal for architectural excellence and a lifelong achievement. So that's my career. So this is a student protest in 1996. This is hills. We were asked to do a study on tourism. What can this place be used for tourism? So we made a proposal, submitted to the State Secretary of the state of Perak in Malaysia. The guy looked at it and he went on and he was saying, where are all the figures, where are the numbers, what are the costing? See, when we were given this brief, we were told to look into the possibility of what can be done to this site. There was no request about costing and so forth. It was to be a second stage, but he wasn't brief about that. So he went on and started to be very, very destructive. Of course, at that time, I've just returned from Sydney for 3 weeks. I was still very young and very new, not aware of the ways of Malaysia. So I said to him, well, what he said was, as far as I'm concerned, those hills are just limestone hills. I'll just have them blasted up and sell the rocks as aggregates, and I get a lot of money. Wow, I mean, so when he said that, I thought, wow, this is really not right. I said, sir, we have done so much effort. We have put in lots of time, thought, and critical thinking of what can be done. And we made some proposal for you to have a look at. You should at least have a look at our drawings instead of, getting upset about it. Perhaps you think it's nothing but just a whole bunch of papers, just like you look at this hill as rocks. On hearing me referring to it as a bunch of papers, he flew off the handle. He got up off his chair and started jumping up behind the conference table. He was a short little guy who was going boom, 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 boom. So I thought, well, better shut up. So we shut up and we move on. So that was my encounter, first encounter. Then later on, Kuala Lumpur was going to be transformed with all this mass traffic and what have you. We're going to have monorails. And I was then the chair, the deputy chairman of the Information Committee. The Information Committee was a guy called Ruslan Khalid, who is passed on. But so what happened is when the suppliers of the monorail came to Kuala Lumpur, he was away in Tibet on holidays. So the secretariat of the institute called me up and said, oh, look, Jimmy, you are the deputy chairman of the Information Committee. Please talk to the press. So, of course, the press asked one question. So I just narrated what we had discussed and agreed upon at an Information Committee meeting a week earlier. So after the thing, next day, the headline that appeared in the newspaper was Monorail, White Elephant. And the Lord Mayor of Kuala Lumpur wasn't happy. He was very, very upset. He called up the institute. He demanded that action should be taken against this guy who is an architect, blah, 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 and all that. Anyway, long and short of it is all the past presidents then decided to have a meeting. And at the meeting, they said, okay, let's put an advertisement in the newspaper, placate the mayor, apologize to him, and let's hang up Jimmy Lim to be tried. So the advertisement they put in the newspaper started, Pam apologized to the Lord Mayor of Kuala Lumpur, Dr. Tan Sri Elias Omar, blah, blah, blah. Concerning the news article, White Elephant, Jimmy Lim, although a council member, was acting on his own behalf, and we therefore apologize that what he said was not representative of the institute, and went on and on. So that's it. So I thought my career was finished, ended on the spot, instant death. But then to my surprise, after that, when I went around Kuala Lumpur, people came up to me and shook hands with me. Hey, good on you, Mr. Lim, for standing up and saying things that we want to say, but whatever. So that's it. So I thought, well, looks like I'm not going to be dead. I will still carry on. So I went on. So it's not all lost. Of course, during that period in 1978, 79, around that period. I won my first PAM award, first award for design on this timber house on the hill. Now, at that time, designing something in timber with opening for natural ventilation, respecting nature and things like that, is unheard of. So if you talk about sustainable architecture, renewable resources, we have been doing that since 1979, okay? So let's not let a lot of people tell us that that's what it is all about. Then, of course, I wrote the Architects Classified. This was what got a lot of the architects. It was harmless. You can't read that. But if any of you are interested, let me know. I'll send you a copy of it. Then, the following year, Jeffrey Bauer was in Malaysia for a joint conference jointly between PAM and the Royal Australian Institute of Architects. Part of the conference was held in Perth, Fremantle, and then the conference moved back to Kuala Lumpur. Jeffrey Bauer was there as a guest speaker and all that, and he was the most popular. And when he was there, he visited my house. And unfortunately, I don't have any good pictures because all my photographs were burnt in the fire, as I told you, in year 2004. Here he is having a picture taken with my daughter, who was then very young. My daughter, I might add, married a chap who's a Sri Lankan descent. So essentially her husband is a Sri Lankan because her father was from here. Then in 1989, MasterCard asked me to appear in the MasterCard. I say, why? He said, well, because we think the architectural profession is a cool profession, and we like to be associated with the architects. You see, this speaks highly of the profession. Back then, we were regarded as a respected, looked up to profession. And that's why they want to be associated with us. So I thought about it. I said, am I advertising myself? No, I'm not advertising myself. I'm advertising somebody else's product. And I'm being paid for it. So if I'm being paid for it, then I'm not selling myself. So I said, okay, after thinking long and thought, if I don't take it on, what if they go and get a quantity surveyor? It will be disastrous. Who would want to be associated with a quantity surveyor? Not at that time anyway. But so I proceeded and I did this thing. And then besides the advertisement, they also had a, what do you call? So this is not activating. There's supposed to be a video. Yeah, this was a video that they produced.
For me, good architecture isn't just functional, it's responsive to its surrounding environment and heritage.
Malaysian-born, Australian-trained master architect Jimmy Lim values past traditions. He also values MasterCard. MasterCard, with over 150 million cards honored by over 8 million establishments, it's the world's most widely accepted card. The Master, MasterCard.
So, when that came out, the proverbial saying, the shit hit the fan. So some people in Singapore wrote to the Malaysian Board of Architects complaining that Jimmy Lim was advertising himself, describing himself in a superlative manner, which should not be for architects. So the board charged me for advertising and for belittling fellow colleagues. After they charged me, a few months later, they then changed it. They said, we have changed our charge from describing you as having advertised yourself and to disadvantage your fellow peers to behavior which in our opinion is disgraceful and unbecoming. So what behavior did I do was unbecoming or disgraceful? It's in the mind of the board. So the board found me guilty of that, so be it. So I thought I would die, but I'm not dying. I'm still here today, and I'm still winning awards. God bless me. So we had a fire, but then they said that fire destroyed an antique shop. Why is it antique shop? Because I had a lot of antiques. I collected a lot of antique furniture. My whole conference room was all antique furniture, chairs, cabinets, and so forth. But never mind. The important thing is 040404 in Chinese sounds like oh death, oh death, oh death. So it's very ominous. If you talk a number, 4 in Chinese is 4 as well as death or die. So Chinese don't like number 4. So, but then it happened on the 4th of April 2004. I was born in the year of 1944. And in year 44 is the 4th cycle of my 15 years life. So I've completed 15 years by the year 2004. So, see, if you look at numbers, whatever it is, for those of you, it's very telling. So when that happened, I was in Zanzibar, evaluated some projects for the Aga Khan Award as a technical reviewer. So I received a phone call 8:30 in the morning in Zanzibar, in a place called Shombe. And my sister said, oh, your office burned down. I said, oh my goodness. So I thought maybe a little fire. I said, well, he said, a whole place. I said, wow. So from 8:30 until sunset, I kept thinking to myself, why? Why? What is it? Now, if you talk about resilience, that's resilience. Why? Why me? Why me? Right? Then the next thing is, by sunset, the answer that came back to me is, why not you? Why not you? It's your turn. So I said, wow. So what do? You jump yourself into the sea of Zanzibar and kill yourself? Or what? Or resourcefulness kicked in. And that's what you do. Resourcefulness kicked in, and you carry on life, and you say, look, I'm going to revive, and you go on. So on my way back from Zanzibar, I stopped over in Mumbai and had a meeting with one of the Ambani brothers. And I remember I had a very huge ring with a stone that wasn't diamond. But whenever I was presenting the thing, all his wife could do was to look at my stone and follow it. But that's the story of women. Wonderful. So the most recent experience is the Bald Hill destruction. We were saying that this thing is going to cause a lot of environmental impact, and the newspaper came out of it. But unfortunately, the newspaper said that the Chief Minister of Penang's name was Lim Guan Eng. The headline was, Lim Guan Eng failed. We never say he failed, but the newspaper did. So we had to go to court, and that was it. So there's a Chief Minister of Penang, and that was in court. But after appeal, we won the case. So that's it. Move life moves on. So now we come back to resilience. Always taking advantage of a disadvantage. That's very important. You never just let any opportunity go by. Then resourcefulness, we talk about Disadvantage is a fairy godmother of creativity. And then we talk about the invisible intellectual ceiling. Resilience, conviviality, and well-being is a simple way of life. Architect's life should be very simple, to be enjoyed. When it's tough, only the tough gets going. We must always feel free, have fun. Only do jobs that you like. Never force your ideas on people. Whose ego is bigger, yours or the client's? Who's got the money, you or the client? So well-being. Practice architecture of humility to be followed by the Tai Chi of architecture. That's the way I practice architecture. In the tropics, we have lots of sun and rain. So I have big roofs. We need breeze to keep cool. So I have no walls. We have lots of forests with trees. So I use the trees to build. I respect nature and the environment. Now, how do you embark and seek for conviviality and well-being? This is where you got to set benchmark or reference points for attainment, your own, not anybody else's. Don't follow any of those dictums that come out from the West. The West may have been best, but the West is lost at the moment. Certain core values in your way of life. You must understand responsibility, diligence, and urgency. Initiative in the Sky movement is to be prepared and resourceful. Architecture of humility followed by the Tai Chi of architecture. Then I practice a set of guidelines which I developed myself. I call them the rights of the tropics. There are about 15 elements, and I think those 15 elements probably could apply in the Sri Lankan context. I'll be very happy to share that with you. Conservation of building materials, passive energy architecture, and architecture without walls, AWW. Now, this is what I call the chart of meritocracy, the IIC chart. You can see how this, I'm sorry, they don't have a pointer for me, so I cannot explain this. But you can see how every time you get up to a point, I move the X and Y thingy, up. So that's why it is. Maybe I could use this, I don't know, cursor. Is that, oh, here's a cursor. God bless it. Here, you see, after you finish your secondary school, this is your IIC, okay? So you move the X and Y 0 here. So you go to university, it goes up, all right? Oh, sunshine. So after you pass your university, you've attained that, then you go on and you go on, So every time you move your things up. So after you got a PhD, I don't mean permanent head damage, I mean real PhD. After you got PhD, a lot of people start to slide into a plateau. And from plateau, they go into mediocrity. You don't do that. And this is one of the big problems in Singapore. A lot of the top Singapore civil servants are being hated by graduates with PhD from top universities in the US and UK. So they come out, they prepare this huge nomenclature on rules, what to do, what not to do, and all that. And the thing stays there, stagnant, for the next 10 years, because the next 10 years you're going to be the head of the department. Nobody challenge them, because in Singapore, you don't challenge. You challenge, you die. So they don't, to survive. So it goes on, and it goes down. So unless they really allow some serious, adjustments to their policies, you will end up in a level of mediocrity. So I think it's not wise. And I hope Sri Lanka will not do that. You always listen to the young people. Now, you see, this is a little chart of my career that, oh, good. So it starts off here at the bottom, and 1990s, you know. So these are all the different benchmarks, where every time I come here, I try something else. So my design is always evolving in the way I solve problems and things like that. So this is, you know, after a while, it becomes second nature. So for the young architects, always try to be innovative and sort of, you know, do things like that. You know? So from 1960 onwards until now. So this is the way at every stage at different years. So this is very important. So I encourage young people to move forward. Now, I want to give you an example. This is a project we did in Ahmedabad. It's a farmhouse. You know, typical farmhouse in Pakistan and India is they replicate their townhouse out in the country but smaller size. Right? It's exactly the same. Now, this one that I've done is I told them that I'm going to lift the house up above the ground, and then I'm going to use timber to build this house. Timber in India is asking for a hole in your head. Where do you get timber? And it's going to be so expensive. Now, this is where resourcefulness comes in. So I told my client, I said, well, you want to get cheap timber? Let's go to Alang. Alang is somewhere in Gujarat where they tear down ships. And every ship that is torn down, there are hundreds and hundreds of tons of timber, and they are just left in the yard, almost for sale. So that's where we went. We got a whole lot of timber, and we designed this house. Now, this house is in a semi-arid area. You can see that there's nothing there. Now, this picture was sent to me by my client 12 years after the house was completed, during the COVID. I think COVID, he had nothing to do, so he took pictures of that and sent to me and said, look, this is what your house looks like now. Oh, I said, thank you very much. And since then, we've been good friends. Now, this was what the house looked like when it was completed, empty, nothing. And the trees are very unhealthy. And I even have a swimming pool up there, raised above the ground, so that the place has a chance to get cool and ventilate and things like that. So that's what it is. Then the picture is sent me 12 years later, and this is what the same thing looks like. Look at the whole largeness of the place. Greenery, the trees are like that and all that. Now, why did it become this way? Because at that point in time, I thought what we'll do is we recycle water. Now, we're talking about sustainable architecture. This is way before the people started talking about it. Now, this is a huge pond that we created when we were building the place. See, this was it. That was what the pond looked like when it was being constructed and a house in the background. Now, from this source of water that transformed the whole landscape of that house. And I think it proves something. It proves that if you think about something and you do it and then it turns out well, then you know you can repeat the same thing again. And this is something we learned. This is resourcefulness. This is revival. So from here, we'll do a lot of other things. This is what the pond looks like today. I don't know. Do you think it's good or it's bad? If you think it's bad, no, so it's bad. But I think it's good. Lots of greenery. If there's a lot of greenery, it cannot be bad. Because if we are talking about ecologically sustainable architecture and environment, this is what it's all about. Then this is what it looks like at night now. Look at all the greenery, the trees and all that. Now, this is the house, Salinger's house, which won the Aga Khan Award. This is what it looks like. This is another view of it. These are the detailing, very simple triangulation of structures. All the structure are connected without using steel. They all use traditional joints. Some other views. Now, that gentleman here, he's the main carpenter. Now you talk about what they call resilience, you talk about resourcefulness, you talk about revival. Now, this guy is blind in his left eye, and he doesn't have a right hand. See that? There's no right hand there, only the left hand. Now, he lost his eye and his right hand when he was doing dynamite fishing in his younger days. Right? Now, after the accident, what would have gone through his mind for him to be able to, at that point in time, be the carpenter to build the house for me, which eventually won the Aga Khan Award. I mean, it's amazing when you see the way he worked, the way he got things done with just one hand. Now, if that's not resourcefulness and a sense of revival to survive, nothing is. This man is the epitome of what resilience means, to me anyway. Okay? I mean, I can only express what is my opinion, because I'm sure not everybody in this room shares with me my opinion, but that's what life's all about. There you are, receiving the award. That's me there, receiving the award from the Aga Khan. That's him receiving the award from the, oh no, sorry, this was the King of Spain. He got it from the Aga Khan. But because he don't have an arm, a right hand, I had to be there to help him take the award as it's given to him. This is Suha Oskan, the convener of the Aga Khan Award at that time, and Zaha Hadid, she was one of the jury members. In fact, she's the one that told the committee jury that this house must win the award for whatever reason. Never got to ask her, because at the night when we were having the dinner, she was too drunk to answer. And that's the owner, the carpenter, and that's me. Oh, this is another. So then later on, I won the Getz Award in Singapore, where our current president of Acacia was also present, and he was there to grace the occasion. And for that, I'll always remember the occasion. It's another thing. So finally, in 2019, July, I was awarded the highest honor any architectural institute may give its member, the Malaysian Institute of Architect Gold Medal for Lifelong Achievement. So that's the story of my life, of what I've done. So I've enjoyed it, and this was at a dinner party we had. And so where do you move forward? So now I just want to share with you a couple of design approaches that we use to do some of our work. This is what I call the evolutionary procedure, stages of the IIC. Now, this is a new house that we were commissioned, the latest completed project. The client was a Singapore client. They came, they are one couple, no children, and they wanted this house to be built not in Singapore, but in Johor. They have acquired a very large piece of land, which they will never be able to do in Singapore. And they said they wanted this to be a weekend house. By some strange coincidence, the brief they gave me was exactly the same brief as the brief for the Salinger's house, this house. The client gave the same brief. So now, having won a house based on the design of 2 triangles, the function, the metrics, the relationship, and what have you, you cannot but automatically be drawn back to the same idea because the circulation is so similar. So what you have to do, you have to keep thinking and thinking. For us, it was a very big, tough fight. So it took us a long time until we this is what the finished product looked like. And this is what the inside looked like. It's completely different. It's all in steel. Same as timber. The client didn't want timber. They just wanted steel because Singaporeans don't believe in timber. Only steel. So we gave them steel, but the steel looked like timber. So this is what it looked like, the interior. And these are spaces. Now, I'm giving you a comparison of the issues that we have to go through to address. So this is the triangle of the Salinger's house. This is the triangle for the Tan's house, leisure farm. And this is the site of the leisure farm villa, and this is the way the planning goes. Whilst that one, we go in this manner with central core. Here we did not have the central core. We had to resist that. And so you have to come up with a more, what they call an innovative sort of approach. And that's what we did. So you can see more detail. This is the living room, this is a guest room, this is a kitchen, dining room, and outdoor space. So in this case, we have dining room, kitchen over here, back of house. This is a stair, this is a guest room, and this is a living room. And this is a entrance lobby. So you see, we still have that access. Then the upstairs, this is the upstairs, and this is the upstairs here. This is the ablution area, this is a master bedroom, and this is just a space to perambulate over the lobby below. And this is the upper part of the living room. So, it still has the sort of a similar character and function as the Salinger's house, but it's a totally own character. So this is a section of the Salinger's house, and this is a section of the leisure farmhouse. So this is what the Salinger's house looked like, and this is what the leisure farm's house looked like. I don't know. I mean, have we solved the problem properly, or have we not? I mean, this is something which we think we've done a reasonable job. We've tried, but not necessarily achieved the thing. So these are the, comparison. See, this is a timber structure on the underside. This is a steel structure. The steel support. These are all timber support. This is external view, and this is the external view here. This is the end here, and that's the thing. So this is what it ends up looking like. Both have a kind of a spectacular expression. And so I think at the end, in conclusion, my personal vision and aim for the profession when I was president 35 years ago is the architecture and the advancement of the profession reflects and manifests what are the issues of that time. And for that, I have done that and recorded in the newsletter of the Institute, as well as in the Majalah magazine. They formed the position paper of the architect's practice at that time. But now, I don't know, things may have changed. And I always believe architects must be brave, preserve self-respect, integrity, and hold your professional dignity high. Architects should only do work that you are pleased with yourself. Have faith and confidence in yourself. In life, you have to live with yourself. Look at yourself in the mirror every morning, not to be cowered into intimidation. And that's very important. If a project challenges you, your integrity, turn the project down, walk away from it. When I entered the Malaysian profession in 1973, it was at a very difficult time. That was when the government had just started the new economic policy, where any businesses or any practice that does not have a Malay partner, or they call him Bumi Putra partner, you'll never get any government project. And most firms and most practices acquiesce to that policy, and they have done very well. But me, being naive, I decided that it was not something that I would do. So I continue on. So I've had a colorful career, won a few awards, and that's it. So the message I wish to share with you all in this conference is, do what you have to do. That's all that I've said before, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our keynote speaker, Professor Jimmy Lin, for a very insightful address, sharing his inspiring journey as an architect, talking to us about the challenges we as architects may encounter during our role and how architects can remain resilient and resourceful through it all. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we're now moving into our first panel discussion at the conference. Allow me now to introduce our panelists and our moderator to you. Our first panelist is architect Upendra Ramdenia. Architect Upendra Ramdenia obtained his BA in Architectural Studies from the University of Huddersfield, UK, his MSc in Architecture from the University of Moratuwa, and his M.Arch in Architecture and Urban Design from Aalto University of Helsinki, Finland. He is a chartered architect, urban designer, a fellow member of the SLIA, and he has represented the SLIA for 15 years as a council member. He is a partner of Design Qs, which specializes in the field of healthcare, resorts, and industrial architectural design. He has been a regular participant in healthcare-related international conferences as a guest speaker, stressing the need for architects to engage in creating healing environments. That's our first panelist. They'll be joining us all as a group in a little while. Let me introduce our second panelist to you as well. We have Dr. Ranil Senanayake. He is a system ecologist from UC Davis. He has developed analog forestry as a rural response to the critical need of restoring the world's lost forest functions. He has served as an executive director of the Environmental Liaison Center International in Nairobi, Kenya, and as a senior scientist for Counterpart International, Washington, D.C. He taught at Monash University and was a senior ecologist at the Center for Farm Planning at Melbourne University. Our third panelist is Professor Devaka Virukon. He graduated from the University of Colombo in 1985 with a major in zoology. He joined the Department of Zoology, University of Colombo, in 1986 and then received a Fulbright scholarship in 1988 to Illinois State University, USA, where he obtained his MSc and PhD. He is senior professor at the University of Colombo, the chief technical advisor on fauna for the Red Listing Program of Sri Lanka from 1996 onwards, a technical advisor to the Ministry of Environment on conservation of threatened species, a consultant on biodiversity to IUCN Sri Lanka, and he's also a member of the Asian Elephant Specialist Group. That's our third panelist for you. Let me now also give you a few details about our moderator. Our moderator is architect Kalpani Jayatilaka. She graduated from the University of Cambridge, UK, with an MPhil in Architecture and Urban Studies in 2019. She currently works as a lecturer at the Faculty of Architecture, University of Moratuwa, her alma mater, where she completed her bachelor's education in architecture. She has worked under the mentorship of architect Godridge Samuel at MMGS Architects, Colombo. She's an associate member of SLIA. Her research interests include well-being in relation to urban space, environmental design, and the role of the architect in driving eco-social value in the urban environment. So with this introduction to our moderator as well as our panelists, it's my pleasure now to invite them all to please come forward and take their seats. And as they join us now, ladies and gentlemen, can we please hear a huge round of applause for our panelists and our moderator.
Thank you, Trishma. So I'll give you a small introduction to our panel discussion today. So this year, the focus of our national conference is exploring the call on architecture to serve societies, empower communities, and ensure a sustainable built environment. So as we delve into the theme of resilience in this section, a key component of our national recovery strategy, we are compelled to consider climate change as the most critical challenge of our modern time. The call on us to ensure ecological protection and environmental resilience in all of our endeavors is now greater than ever and more profound, and it's just simply inescapable as architects that we have to consider it. So this panel discussion is focused on finding ways that we, as architects, can contribute to the congruence of industrial development and environmental resilience, two things that don't always align. So how do we find that alignment? The designation of the city of Colombo, our commercial capital, as a Ramsar wetland city in the recent years highlights the sensitivity and significance of the ecology that we are dealing with. That's just one aspect of among the many that underscores the need to synergize environmental systems and human systems. There is a need to shift towards more intelligent urbanization processes. So our panel, firstly, will explore the macro context in terms of the development needs that we have, and then focus on innovations for environmental sustainability at the grassroots level. Our speakers are geared up today to explore resilience in the face of climate change, exploring topics like the recovery of natural environments through architecture and ecosystem services as the way forward. To deliver practical outcomes, the transformative potential of mapping as a tool for change will also be explored, seeking to foster synergy between natural systems and man-made systems. The importance of including resilience as a key consideration at the policy planning level will also be explored and will focus on the role of the architect in all of this. So our panel today consists of experts, veteran architect Upendra Ramdeniya, systems ecologist, Dr. Ranil Senanayake, and environmentalist, Professor Devaka Veerakorn. They are all at the forefronts of their respective fields of practice and research. So that's how our panel is set out. So without further ado, I invite architect Upendra Ramdeniya to the podium to set the general stage of our panel discussion. Thank you.
Morning to all of you. Let me thank Professor Lim to remind us that the three words resilience, resourcefulness, and revival rhymes well, but very difficult to achieve. And Sri Lanka is a good example. As you know, my presentations are very based on facts, and I hold no punches. The talk is about envisioning the future landscape of Sri Lanka. What if and why not? First part is to do with looking at missed opportunities, and why not refers to more a synthesis of ideas. Inclusive, sustainable industrialization, and to protect environment and conserve biodiversity is the purpose of this discussion. Issues refer to economy, unmet aspirations, and human settlements. And let's start on what if. What if we had planned development in Sri Lanka? Unfortunately, we don't have planned development. Collaboration is therefore needed to have planned development to bring about economic challenges, biodiversity challenges, loss of habitat challenges. We have a national economic policy and plan, which is revised from time to time. With the chaotic political situation, the people who are working on the national physical plan has now come up with a plan which is for 2050, which architect planner Viranjan has shared with the architecture fraternity. I thank him for that. It has short-term, medium-term, and long-term proposals. And in this forum, I would like to propose an accelerator program to bring about industrial development, environmental protection, and biodiversity as an accelerator program in addition to the short-term program. Now, I was very much influenced by Professor Rohan Samarajiva, who was a speaker last year here. I was his moderator. He talks about what ape sihina rate sihina koi batada. In fact, he's asking what happened to our dreams for the young people. What happened to our dreams? Basically, he drives a connection between economic struggle as well as human capital flight. Before the Aragale, we had refugees live in Sri Lanka, housemaids working in Middle East, and after the Aragale, we have students wanting to leave the country and professionals due to the tax matters. Students, a survey done by Professor Samarjeev indicate 83% of students would like to leave the country. These are real issues. These are the people who have influenced me. 2 of them are seated here. 2 of them I have interviewed with SLIA, and others are economists. Thank you, all of you. The real issue in Sri Lanka is that our financial debt is such, even if we have 12% growth, we have to reach zero only by 2048. Corruption perception is 101 out of 180. Ease of doing business, 99 out of 190. And our openness to doing business, international trade, 156 out of 165. 156 out of 165. So it goes to prove that we are not open to business. Now, the book written in 1960s by Jellicoe, The Landscape of Man, indicate that symptoms of this human behavior, how we use our land, will be shown when you look at the landscape. When you look at the landscape of Sri Lanka, it's quite clear. 82% of the land is still owned by the state, poorly managed and underutilized. History reveals that Sri Lankan land use very much used by the colonial time to grow cash crops, tea, rubber, coconut, etc. A lot of land was restructured in order to do that, loss of wildlife and biodiversity. Then we did Mahaveli project in 1964, agro-based industries for import substitution and hydropower. Again, no exports. Gammudawa 1978 started. I was one of the architects working on Gammudawa Mayangane. Again, no exports. It was development for urbanization. Then shifting of administration city from Colombo to Jayawardenepura. again, no exports. Western province megapolis looked at it, never materialized. Port city never materialized. And strategic plan township program is still going on. So as you can see, our emphasis was on import substitution and less on exports. Similarly, a BOA was set up in 1978, and we did very well. Leading in the region, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad and Jiang Zemin, Prime Minister of China, visited in 1991, and DFC Lindell, as well as 17 other industrial zones began, and we were leading. Then after 1995, not a single industrial zone was built. Port City, Hambantota, and every other project is still in the making. As a result, there are a lot of shortcomings in terms of export market. Then another blunder we did, one, setting up a Strategic Development Project Act, which created giving tax-free allowances to investors, bypassing the BOI. As a result, 25 projects that were approved, none of which is based on export manufacturing. We also failed to support social infrastructure for workers in free trade zones, and these are aspects which investors look before they come to a country. And another setback was that is visible in the yellow chart. Out of last 30 years, our export basket in terms of products and services have remained the same, whereas Thailand is below us. So, reliance on imports, forex reserves empty, default on debt payments, our economy has completely collapsed, said the Prime Minister. There's a lot to learn. Architects, designers, planners have stepped away from this issue. I see very little articles on the newspapers. But if you look at history, architects, planners have been at the right front, creating industrial zones. 1887, Port Sunlight in England, Lever Brothers set up housing for the workers, creating the Garden City movement in 1902. Bourneville, 1903, Cadbury's chocolate factory started creating enclaves for their workers, creating the neighborhood concept in 1928. Shannon Free Trade Zone in Ireland, creating for the first time for the export market to US. Then today, trade zones are designed by architects and planners, almost like townships. When an investor comes to a country, first thing they look at is the SEZ policies. Secondly, what access does it give when you come to Sri Lanka? What are the areas in which, what markets can they access? Third comes the physical and the social infrastructure. Sri Lanka is located right next to India and China, and India is going to be booming center in the next 15 years. China and Bangladesh right next to it. We need regional stability as well as regional collaboration with the supply chain. Sri Lanka also has a massive land within the seaboard areas that we own, and Southeast Asia, as you can see, the links are very clear. Every country is collaborating with each other. Sri Lanka has remained independent, not many connections with free trade zones. In fact, we have 4 free trade agreements, none of which are working quite well. So the new concept of creating infrastructure for light industries has a new concept, that is UN Habitat 2015. You look at economic, social, and environment together, creating smaller areas for business entities, away from enclaves that were created as trade zones. New trade zones promote spillover to the area outside, so the local supply chain can fit in with that. There are sustainable development goals as well as various other systems to include the local supply chain to be part of that. It's not a caged area where security blocks the locals getting in and out. This is a project done in Gujarat. Now, the new concept looks at clusters rather than enclaves. Social activities as well as infrastructure based on R&D universities are part of that thinking. Sustainable industrial development is the way forward, and this allows countries to move from Industrial Revolution 2 to Industrial Revolution 5, which includes digital technologies. So the concept of SEZ, ESEZs, needs very little space, 3 kilometer by 3 kilometer area. Traditional ones being much larger. Then it's spill over into small areas of 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer and single functions thereon. India and China, despite all the talk we hear, India learned a lot from China. There are twin cities, Beijing with Delhi, Kunming with Calcutta, Chengdu with Bengaluru. There are sister provinces, China and India, Guangdong province with Gujarat state. So this connectivity is critically important for the way forward. As you can see, these are the new tax laws that are passed in India, allowing investors to come in. We have to either match it or do better than that. This is the why not part, not the sad part, but the part where we can actually improve on. What I have done here is that taken the 2050 National Physical Plan, 2048, and superimpose, augmenting the existing infrastructure that we already have, together with wildlife conservation sensitive areas, whether we could have a public-private partnership as individual projects to overlap and do a combined development together. So in fact, we have identified only 3 new areas. Rest are basically augmenting the current infrastructure that is already there. What is yellow are the larger ones, brown the smallest ones, green is the next. Each of these should have airport as well as boat access, that is shipping access. For example, Kilinochchi, north of Sri Lanka, there's a good potential of creating a bridge across to India. Professor Samarjiva talked about it. There are trains and vehicles as well as gas and oil movement between Sri Lanka and India, starting from a bridge that can link the two, as well as Manna onwards, recreating the railway track and the boating facility to India. In fact, piggyback on the success of India. Secondly, we can look at Putlam below that. A large sum of land is readily available. I checked it on Google Maps, and there is a possibility of expanding. These are areas in which Sri Lanka can work as public-private partnerships. There is hope to develop the Trincomalee area, one of the biggest natural harbors in Asia. Lots of land available in Sampur and beyond, which can also be expanded tremendously, naval activities as well as industrial activities. There was a proposal in 2009 National Physical Plan, a railway link between India and Sri Lanka, which will promote tourism. This is the proposal which I was part of, looked at megapolis. About 6 projects to be handled within Sri Lanka. Land is available. Ratmalana Industrial, Malabe Tech City, Port City, Valisara Logistic Park, Katnayaka Industrial Park, Mirigama. Lands are available. Batiklo, again, fisheries as well as agriculture-based projects can be started. There is already an existing trade zone. Then Hambantota. Hambantota was originally thought to link the airport with the harbor. Unfortunately, harbor was given to the Chinese without including the development of the industrial zone. That's a missed opportunity. And there is a possibility of linking the two in the years to come. Then maritime activities in Gaul, there are a lot of yachts coming to Gaul, and maritime related activities can be a trade zone. Then a whole load of land, which are already identified BOI, for agro projects, Monragala, Polonnaruwa, Ampara, Horona. Contiguous land, almost extending up to 20,000 acres with very little trees. So there is need to degazette them and bring it under Industrial Zone Act. So what I have done here is to put these projects together and look at the possibility what it can do. There is an easy way of doing development together with environment development as a part of the collective effort which SLIA could be the leader. I will now introduce two projects which I have worked on. Unfortunately, this never took off, but I will show it to you. When I worked on Megapolis, our task was to set up a tech city. We looked at what is available. There is a tertiary education facility in Malabe, residential township close by, as well as a research and development university. There was no need to start from zero. Out of 15 years, 12 years work has already happened. We looked at how to connect the two by leaving the green spaces connecting. This is the transport network we looked at, walkable, 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer cities connecting as clusters, pedestrian and cycling walkways connecting the two. Then the Korean government came to help. There was about 50 to 60 engineers working here, architects. And eventually, this became a realistic project. And they looked at a smart city plan, park and green network plan, land use plan, and they started doing sketches, and they even considered giving the first R&D university to Sri Lanka. Unfortunately, this is the main plan, exit from Meegoda Multimodal Center, National Space Hub, high-tech industries, as well as incubators. With the change of the government, this project stalled, and the same people who worked with us, the Koreans, did this same project in Vietnam. This I checked on the internet. This is functioning now. So I call this a missed opportunity. This is another project that I'm working on. This is initiated by 4 doctors who worked in US, Sri Lankan doctors, who saw the poor conditions of Sri Lankan workers in Middle East, and they thought, let's do a project where we can upskill. When workers go to work in Middle East, they would rather be upskilled and they'll do better jobs. So healthcare was a choice. We looked at how to work on this as a urban design. Kerawalapiti exit point, 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer. HOD, that is a hospital-oriented development, and a TOD, which is a transit-oriented development. These two combined together, connecting the port city, commuter only 25 minutes to the port city, and to the airport only 5 minutes. So there is a potential of mass housing in this area. We looked at that. And we also looked at, because it's in the wetland, right next to the Kerawalapiti marsh, how we could develop this 5-acre land that we have. We thought of urban acupuncture, small plots of green areas that can be developed, and looked at super blocks, how we can do dense development, which can then be connected with blue, green, red connectivity. And if we do this project, it could be a new set of regulations which all the others can use. We looked as a sponge, the landscape, how the water can be collected and gradually released into the marsh so that there is no flooding, to avoid flooding. Buildings were designed accordingly by looking at wellness, novel business model, ecology, affordable housing, alternative energy, etc. And we began by doing a biodiversity survey. We found that there was a indigenous amphibian, a frog, and a fish living within our site, lots of butterflies, dragonflies, and we decided to build only on 30% of the land, allowing 70% to be restored, Having done the biodiversity plan, we looked at how to create these ponds. We take 10 meter by 10 meter area, remove the invasive plants, and add indigenous plants back into that, and then gradually letting it develop over a period of time. So this is a little video of the project. Okay, just to sum up, my idea is to promote collaborative development between architect, planners, urban designers, biologists, environmentalists, and come up with an accelerated program to bring about industrial development together with environmental protection, biodiversity conservation. We have the two experts here with me. They will advise us how to proceed. And by doing so, we can overlap that with the National Physical Plan. We have to support the National Physical Plan in order to avoid unplanned development. And Sri Lanka is a good example of unplanned development. As you can see, this will change the demography of the country. The slide here is the Western province. When the British left, if you put the lights on at night, that's where it is. We all live in the Western province and work here. If you do this set of new cities, there will be competition among them, as well as airport and port connectivity. Shenzhen to China, that kind of concept. These can be looked as charter cities with special jurisdiction to create new governance systems and enact policy reforms to be relevant with the ever-changing supply chain within the neighborhood. And therefore, we should be able to reverse the migration of human capital flight. Thank you.
Thank you, Architect
Now I would
Upendra.
invite
Yes.
Dr. Rajil Senanayake to proceed with his talk. Thank you.
We've got a pointer here, my dear. Thank you. This one? Yeah. This one, point for this. Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to talk to you today about a few things in Sri Lanka, but the most important is climate change. How are we going to face what's coming before us? How can we understand it? Some examples how we can respond, some of the challenges that will be before us. So, getting into this, we must understand what climate change is. What are the changes expected? How will it impact national planning? Of course, we should all know that the consensus is there will be changes in rainfall, more floods, more droughts, or intense rain events, more frequent and severe heat waves, and salting of coastal agricultural soils. Now, this happens as a consequence of carbon dioxide. The principal driver of climate change is carbon dioxide produced by the burning of fossil fuels to power all the so-called industrial revolutions, including the green revolution in agriculture. Of course, what we do then is that when we burn fossil energy, fossil carbon dioxide is added to the atmosphere through the burning of these fossil fuels. And this is what provokes climate change. As you can see in this figure here, the industry, fossil fuel use is the greatest source of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. In addition to that, we have, unfortunately, agriculture. We have sort of gone this green revolution path of agriculture, which means using more and more fossil fuel to give us agricultural productivity. In the end, if you look at this in the US, what we have is it takes this much of fossil fuel energy to produce that much of food. So what we are doing is we have changed agriculture from being sustainable in its own right to being sustainable only if there is fossil fuel energy. How did we get here? How did we get into this mess? Well, unfortunately, Sri Lanka was an early victim to this whole question of development through the consumption of fossil energy. It was in 1979 that the Sri Lankan government made a formal announcement in the newspapers. They said, no oil means no development, and less oil, less development. It is oil that keeps the wheels of development moving. 79. Since then, we have been mindlessly just chasing this whole question of development through the consumption of fossil fuel, and it's getting us into a terrible situation to face the future with. What is this consumption of fossil fuel? What is this development that we are chasing? It's basically this. Growth based on consumption of oil drives climate change. We know that. And we have been told that, hey, development means you got to purchase more, work harder, earn more money, just work a little more. You can buy something new. If the old one is not good enough, get the new one. This is development. This is consumption. We are like rats in a trap. We, all of us, have been forced to run this gauntlet, and through all our lives till we die, this is what we keep doing. We are addicted to oil. And the purveyors of oil will say, don't worry, that you're burning this oil and putting carbon dioxide. Don't worry, plant a tree. And the tree will absorb the oil. You've heard this many times. This whole question of carbon neutrality, being carbon neutral by planting a tree, is a bunch of rubbish. This is what happens. Consider what happens. Here, we take fossil carbon, we burn it in our industry, and then we say, don't worry, plant a tree, the tree will soak the oil up. Sure, it will. And for how long will it keep it? 1,000 years? 2,000 years? When it dies, what happens? That carbon goes back into the atmosphere. The problem is, the time carbon can be sequestered for by trees and living things is about 20,000 years maximum. And the time carbon is sequestered by fossils in rock is 10 to 200 million years. Now, there's no comparison between 2,000 and 200 million. So, fossil once burnt, carbon once burnt, can never be put away in a successful way to make it carbon neutral. So this is the myth that we have been sold, that planting trees will absorb the carbon. They will not. What can we do also, and how can we face this? Well, one of the things with increasing carbon dioxide is, of course, heating. And the warming affects our island, Sri Lanka, because we are an oceanic island. We're surrounded by the ocean. And this means increased precipitation. And increased precipitation events create areas that are prone to flooding with increasing frequency. We map these areas now. These areas have been very clearly identified. And we have gone further. We have also identified the risk assessment in terms of flooding. We have generated maps with great detail. But though we have done all that, the response is nada. The response to loss through flooding does not address either the frequency or it does not address the changes in living design that is required. So year after year, twice a year sometimes, these poor people get their houses covered with water. They lose everything they had when the flood comes up. When the flood goes down, they have to go back and start all over again. Can't we do something a little better? Can't we look around us? Look at our neighbors. Look what they've done. The potential response designs that are found in neighboring countries that respond to flooding, they build on stilts. If the architects said, we in flooding areas that are prone to flooding, all housing must be elevated, then we have architectural designs, and if the government comes in and determines that this is what's required in these areas to help lift these people out of the future where flooding is going to be a regular event. This is climate change. We can also, building on stilts, we can make, in the modern idiom, we can do innovative designs. And another thing is this. Now, when I was in the Amazon in Brazil, basically the water rises constantly and the people cannot grow anything on the ground because of flooding. What do? With regular flooding, food production has to be elevated above the flood to avoid loss. In Sri Lanka, we still haven't even considered this. So these are things that we have to consider in design to get over some of the future that's before us. Now, the future that's before us is very difficult because of another aspect of climate change, and that is increases in ambient temperature. As the temperature increases, all of us are going to be faced with some real physical problems, and that's this. As the temperature goes up, we should understand that chlorophyll, the green matter in all these plants, in all these leaves, chlorophyll, it's an enzyme. It has an operating temperature that is optimal, 37 to 38 degrees centigrade. After that, it degrades. So the hotter it gets after 38 to 39, the less crops we are going to have, the less food we are going to have. And if the heat keeps going up, like it's happening in many areas in Asia and in Africa, there will be a time when there'll be no food. Production will be impossible because the temperature will be too high for the plants to produce, and the plants will die. And heat stress can take the crop at any time and take it as it's growing or as the fruits are ripening. Look at this map of Asia, Sri Lanka and India. A whole part of central India is over 40 degrees centigrade, which means food production is severely affected. If it goes up further, no food. This is our neighborhood. This is what's going to happen in the future. And if we are not aware of this, and if we haven't planned for this, we will be in very serious trouble into the future. So the temperature is going up. What can we do? Is there anything we can do? Well, there are certain things we can do. One is look at what's called vegetational cooling. Transpiration in trees and plants provides cooling in the ambient environment. Usually, one large tree gives you about roughly 1,200,000 British thermal units worth of cooling a day. Now, if you consider this as a design feature and start creating landscapes with trees, productive landscapes, with trees around which bring the temperature, the ambient temperature lower, we can decrease the ambient temperature by almost 3 degrees. And this could be the difference between starvation and food. So designing or redesigning or retrofitting our landscapes is going to be critical. Now, when we do that, we have to understand what is future agriculture. Can industrial agriculture adapt to feed the future? Here's industrial agriculture, just straight, nothing at all. When the heat rises, it'll be the same heat all through here, and everything is affected. Now, rice grown in another way, traditional way, surrounded by trees and plants, has a cooling effect to it. So landscapes like this will give you food landscapes like this will not in the future that's coming up. So if you're going to do this design, what kind of design can we have in these tree-dominated areas? Well, one of the things that started from Sri Lanka, I'd like to share with you, is a process called analog forestry. Analog forestry basically is a silvicultural system, a tree-growing system, that seeks to create a tree-dominated ecosystem analogous. The word is analogous, similar to the original mature ecosystem, both in architectural structure and ecological function. Now, you can go to the web page for more information. It works on 12 principles, but it works on the fact that a forest, basically, is the end of a process. If you cut a forest and leave it alone, what happens? First the grasses, this bare soil, then the grasses and herbs slowly grow on it, and then very slowly the bushes and shrubs grow on it, and then the young forest begins, and eventually the mature forest begins. A forest is a process. It's not just this. This cannot happen if all these things do not happen. So most times people will think, oh, we can plant a couple of trees and it's a forest. No. A forest is a process that has to be followed. Another feature is that in terms of all forests all over the world, in terms of biodiversity, trees account for 1% of the biodiversity of any forest anywhere in the world. 1%. 99% of the biodiversity of any forest is in things other than trees, ranging from the bushes, the vines, the epiphytes, the birds, the lizards, the microorganisms. All that is a part of the forest. And that's what we have to recognize. And once we do that, we can choose the ideal vegetational structure for the maximization of photosynthetic biomass at each stage. So as the forest grows, we can have agriculture first, and then we can put a few trees on it and call it agroforestry. We can put a few shrubs and things on it and move on to permaculture, or look at the complete structure of the original forest and try and make something analogous or similar to it, which is analog forestry. Analog forestry basically works on 12 principles. I won't go through all of them here, but if you look at them, these are the 12 principles, and I'll check one principle, observe and record, to demonstrate how it operates, and it operates like this. Principle 1 says observe and record. To do that, we go into a forest and we look at how many canopies are there, at what level are they, what are the other growth forms there are, and all that is codified into a formula. That formula then is taken to where you are going to do your intervention. You do a similar formula for the intervention area, and you do a gap analysis. You see what is missing. And that is what you design to bring in. Now, analog forestry has been practiced now for many years, and is yielding interesting results. Here's an example from Sri Lanka. This is the Belipala Arboretum. This is an analog forest design, 90% exotic species. This is the natural forest we followed. But as a consequence of growing this, in 8 years, over 60% of the native vertebrates have returned into this analog forest. We have had similar things in Ecuador, where open pastures are converted into high biodiversity biomass analog forests. This is in 4 years in Ecuador. Or we use it in Cuba to restore the salinated soils in Cuba, because of intense irrigation, the soils got extremely salinated there in Cuba, brought it back using analog forestry. And in Brazil, the Satremave, they had cleared forests. We use analog forest to bring back the biodiversity and biomass. And in the end, this system also has a certification system that can help the farmer earn more money from the crop if they follow an analog forest design. So there's a market made for people to get extra income from this system. But while we do all this, and we have to look at Sri Lanka and where we stand today, but we are in a very difficult place because of this. The agricultural development, so-called development, has created this for us. As you can see, the pesticide use per hectare is going up, the output is going down. And if you look at just how much we are importing, every year we bring over 135 kilograms or 135 liters of agrotoxins that we apply on our country. Now this figure is looking at Sri Lanka, the total of Sri Lanka. Consider that agriculture accounts for roughly only about 10 to 15% of our land mass, and then you see the amount of poisons that we put onto our land, call it agriculture, to produce our food. So this is very difficult, and it's also made more difficult by people who don't understand agriculture. Unfortunately, agriculture is driven from the soil. And this is what the soil is. The soil is the most specious ecosystem on earth. A vast majority of the organisms in soil have not even been described yet. 1 gram of soil, enough to cover my thumbnail, has in it 1 to 2 billion individual cells of bacteria. Sharing that same space with the bacteria, there's 100 to 200 million individual cells of actinomycetes. Sharing the same space with the bacteria and the actinomycetes, you get a kilometer or more of fungal hyphae. In addition to that, you got algal cells, nematodes, microarthropods. Soil, living soil is a living ecosystem. And in a good soil, there is roughly about 10 to 15 tons of living matter in a good agricultural soil per hectare. What it shows us is there's 10 to 15 horsepower of biological energy working in the soil to give you the chemical transformations required to make agriculture sustainable. That's how our ancestors did agriculture through our history. 2,000 years of agriculture. We saved our soils. We came to modern agriculture, we put those chemicals, and we've destroyed the soils. That is the challenge before us. How can we restore what we destroyed? And it is not going to be an easy job, because life in the soil is totally dependent from the plants that grow above it. See, the soil cannot live by itself. There's no food going in there. The plants have to do photosynthesis, collect the energy, then put it through the soils through their roots. Not understanding an ecosystem, an agro-ecosystem, and how it functions has put us into this terrible situation where the so-called development agents have brought in misery to our farmers and destroyed our ecosystems. For instance, with the addition of agrochemicals, this is what happens. The soil organisms disappear, and the soil ecosystem is tiny. The plants can only take or only have chemical inputs to make the crop. If you did not do that, and if you had a living soil, this is what happens. The hypha mycelium network increases the root surface area. It moves the soil, the living soil area, much, much further than the roots themselves. And this is how sustainable agriculture was practiced through the millennia. Now, doing this will create soil organic matter, which is a critical component of a sustainable landscape. Why? Because soil organic matter, for every 1% increase in organic matter, we have 20,000 gallons of water stored in the soil for agriculture. Soil is a living thing, and soil and the air above have been exchanging gases through millennia. Now we come, human beings, we come here, and what do? We urbanize, we develop. And when we urbanize, what do? With urbanization, all soil functions cease. Because here is how the soil works with the air and the soil. This discourse has been going on for millennia. We come here and we seal this soil completely. What do? We seal it, entomb it, like putting it in a tomb. And that soil and that ecosystem have no more ecosystem services to give us. So when we urbanize, we seal the ecosystems forever, and we take away all the ecosystem services that nature gives us through urbanization. And the opportunity cost of this ecosystem service loss through disruption or through soil entombing is never recognized nor compensated for. Here, if you look at the farm, the only thing that's worthwhile to the urban sector is the apples that come from the farm. The farm has all these components in it, but it has no interest to the urban economy. So the farmer is left to be poor, selling only those little apples that they can get out of the farm to get their income. Now, here's another suggestion. That is, that a productive value of a farm can be increased by looking at the primary ecosystem services. Today, only this fruit has value when it's sent to market. But in an economy that recognizes primary ecosystem services, the leaves too must have value, and it has value as long as it is living. Now, this is an important thing. This has been brought about by the Sri Lanka position paper when we went to COP21 in 2015. Sri Lanka made this statement that we are aware of all this. But of course, nothing happened. The world was quiet. So, a Sri Lankan company, Earth Restoration, picked up the challenge, and we have now created a system where we can actually start paying farmers for the photosynthetic biomass that they have on their farms. This is the system, the Earth Restoration system. The farmers are paid for 4 years for looking after a tree or plant, which is contracted. And under the contract, the person who's investing gets the primary ecosystem services, which is oxygen, clean water, and dynamic carbon that is produced through that contract period. Now, here's an example of how this worked. These are 7 ladies, war widows actually, in Chedikulam. These ladies had 45 units, that is 45 trees, and they worked with them for 3 to 4 years, and they, with 45 trees, produced $38,228 worth of oxygen, contracted oxygen, that they transacted into the global commons. Here is the new wealth, here is the new economy, and this is the way forward into the future. And if you ask, well, where is the wealth, where is the money? Here. Here's the value of ecosystem services as defined by the economists. And the economists say, this is the value. This year, in 2023, the value was over $174 trillion a year. This is the value of the ecosystem services. And if you look at this, the rainforests, the grasslands, temperate, the croplands, all have a value. We look at that value, and then we look at Sri Lanka. And here we are. All those elements that were shown in the previous slide are here in Sri Lanka. So we know that these things have incredible ecosystem services value. But when we look at development, the development potential, some of these things are completely covered over. So the development potential of land must account for the ecosystem value possible from that land. And urbanizing it must mean that the opportunity cost of lost ecosystem services has to be paid, either to that community, to the farmer, or to the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will close now. This is basically my thesis of how this nation, all of us, can hopefully climb out of the mess that the politicians have got us into. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anil. Thank you very much. I think we can certainly return to some of those topics. He highlighted the need to really reconcile industrial development and environmental protection, and some of the avenues that we can take, some of the available avenues, such as ecosystem services, particularly analog forestry and architectural structures. We can return to that. Now I invite Professor Devaka Veerakorn. He'll be talking about the use of wetlands as urban green spaces to enhance resilience in coastal cities, and focused on Colombo as a case study. Professor Devaka, over to you.
Thank you, Kalpani. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be following up what Dr. Senanayake said. I might be reiterating some of those. But the thesis of my presentation is, can we use urban wetlands as urban green spaces to enhance resilience of coastal cities against climate change? Because if you look at the global trend, urbanization is here. At present, about 50% of the global population live in urban centers. By 2050, this is predicted to increase up to 70%. But this urbanization comes at a cost. And see, I've given some examples. 24%, almost a quarter of the urban population live under very trying conditions. But half of the urban population do not have access to transport, convenient access to transport. There is a lot of pollution causing respiratory diseases, and also urban centers result in emissions, which Dr. Anil was referring to, which is driving us towards this climate change crisis. If you look at Sri Lanka, you will find that the same trends are here, not as much as what we see in a global level, but currently about 20% of our population live in urban centers, and if you look at the trend line, you can see it's going to increase in the future. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the footprint of urbanization. What I'm showing you here is some results we have obtained from a study we have done in a small river basin north of Kalani River. This is actually two river basins called Kaluoya and Mudunala. This river basin contains, if you from the coastal side, from Paliagoda up to Jayala, and if you go more inwards, Kandana, Kadawata, Kiribatgoda, all these areas have undergone rapid urbanization over the last 3 decades. And what you see in this series of diagrams is how the vegetation cover in this river basin has changed over a period of 3 decades. In 1975, 92% of the land area was covered with vegetation. By 2016, it has come down to a mere 24%. All of those vegetated areas have been converted to human use areas. And this results in serious problems such as our inability to sequester carbon, and then a lot of other problems that come up with urbanization. So if you look at urbanization, it is going to happen, it is happening, and it will be the way of the future, but it does come with some number of other side effects. Of course, pollution is one of the bigger issues because more people living in urban centers, more use of vehicles, lots of use of energy, water, all this lead to eventually pollution. Then high heat, because we are covering the surface with concrete, it does not absorb the heat, it just reflects it, creating heat islands. Water pollution, because we are now concentrating people into smaller areas. Large, if you look at a high-rise building, so many families are living in a very small area, utilizing a large quantity of water and releasing a lot of wastewater into the system. Increased incidence of communicable diseases because urban living is very stressful. Stress reduces your immunity, and when your immunity is lost, you become sick faster. And if there are communicable diseases, high densities result in spread of diseases. So what we are doing is we are reducing our resilience, and at the same time, we are putting ourselves in harm's way by increasing the incidence of disease spread, as we discovered from COVID. Then increase vulnerability to natural hazards. So natural hazards, if a flood occurs and if there are no people, it's not a flood, it's just rivers overflowing. But the magnitude of the flood depends on how many people and their processes are affected. So when you increase people in a flood-prone area, you are increasing their vulnerability, you are increasing the impact of floods. That's basically what is happening in Colombo. I will come back to that in a moment. And this kind of change, like the one that I've shown you, when you change the vegetation cover so rapid, it also leads to loss of biodiversity. And biodiversity, as Dr. Selanaka pointed out, provides us lots of services that we do not appreciate because we do not directly feel those services, most of them. And climate change, which is happening, a slow process that is affecting us, is going to make things worse. Now, Dr. Senaka also referred to this. This is what we are now, the kind of thing that we do. If you go around Colombo, we use a lot of this kind of paving to cover our surfaces. But the interface between the land and air is very important because there are so many things exchanging between this interface. When the rainwater falls on this, it penetrates into the ground and forms groundwater. There is exchange of gases and such as nitrogen and carbon dioxide. So a lot of life support systems. Our planet lives on a recycling system. Water is recycled, nitrogen is recycled, carbon is recycled. So these are called cycles, and these cycles depend on this interface. But when you close this interface, this recycling comes to a dead end. So we have to rethink, this may be beautiful, but is this what we want to do? Do we want to make our surfaces impervious? And this also contributes to flood, because when rainwater falls, it doesn't penetrate into the ground. It travels very fast over surfaces like that, accumulating in lowlands and then eventually slowly swelling up into flood situations. So I'm very thankful for this opportunity I've been given to talk to you, because I generally talk to my own discipline, sort of like preaching to the pulpit, but talking to people like you who are doing actually the designs, it gives me an opportunity to at least influence your thinking, I hope, in how we should be designing things, especially when it comes to urban design. Because there are various solutions we can find for the problems I have indicated. We can find engineering solutions for flood. We can find design solutions for emission by designing cities in such a way that services are provided in a smaller area so people don't have to drive around to do a lot of their work. You can have technological solutions, efficient use of energy, or efficient use of water. You can also have economic incentives to encourage people to do this. And today we are talking a lot about nature-based solutions. So nature, I'm not going to talk about the others because it's not within my mandate, but I'm a conservation biologist, and all my life what I've been doing is working with nature. So nature-based solutions refers to actions that are either inspired by what is happening in nature or copying what is doing in nature to do things better. Because if you look at this planet, life existed for 4 billion years. We have come here only about 200,000 years ago. So nature had time to test and fine-tune a lot of these processes, and we can learn a lot from what is happening in nature. So the whole idea of nature-based solution is to enhance existing natural habitats and make them provide the services that we get from them in a better way, whether it be storing carbon or regulating water flows or removing toxins, etc. So nature-based solutions can also be used to increase resilience against disaster. Aim of my presentation today is to drive 2 points. One is urban wetlands presents us with the ability to provide green spaces and make cities sustainable. And secondly, wetlands can also help us to become more resilient towards the predicted climate change impacts. I'm going to take City of Colombo as an example to talk about it because there's a lot of information about Colombo wetlands, and I have been working on Colombo wetlands for more than 6 years. But Colombo is a coastal city. And if you look at Sri Lanka, you will find most of our major cities are in the coastline, whether it be Colombo, Kalutara, Galle, Matara, Batticaloa, etc. And what you'd also recognize is that most of these cities are located in a river mouth. Colombo, in the river mouth of Kalania, Kalutara, Kaluganga, Galle, Ginganga, and so on. And this is nothing unusual because most of the estuaries are the cradles of civilization because estuaries provide conditions that are conducive for human settlement. But the issue when you live in a river mouth is the place from where all the water that is falling into a river basin releases into the ocean. So this is a bottleneck, and here, if we don't manage the landscape properly, the inevitable consequence is floods. And we who live in Colombo are familiar with this. These floods can cause serious damage. This is the 2016 flood, and you can see in this article what it refers to. The damage that was caused by it is colossal. It's US $1.5 billion, not rupees, $1.5 billion US dollars. And this was based on insurance claims made by people for their vehicles damaged, their houses damaged, but mostly damage in the industrial zones such as Biagama and so on. So floods can cause serious damage, and therefore they are something that we have to be thinking about. And unfortunately, climate change is also here. And what climate change does is it brings some slow, long-term changes, but the rapid changes triggered by climate change is these cycles of flood and drought. And these are the data that for Sri Lanka, you can see from 2017 to 2020, there's been cycles of flood followed by drought, flood, drought. And so what we can see is the frequency of floods are increasing, and in the future, things are going to be even worse. So if we live in capital or cities that are coastal, this is something that we have to be thinking about. If we want to make our cities resilient, we'll have to make sure that it is resilient to mostly flood. So the second reason why I've selected wetlands is what Kalpani also referred to. Sri Lanka's city of Colombo is one of the 18 Ramsar wetland cities that have been declared thus far. And we are the only Ramsar city in South Asia. And I think most of us who live in Colombo do not know this or even appreciate that we are a Ramsar city because we have managed our wetlands in fairly good manner thus far. So wetlands, I think, are our solution for the predicted climate change impact, at least the immediate impacts of floods, because wetlands are able to absorb flood water to a certain degree and thereby prevent flooding of the hinterland. But the ability of wetlands to provide this service depends on maintaining wetlands in good condition. So wetlands provides us a way to increase our resilience against flood. It will also, as Dr. Sinanayaka pointed out, it has a cooling effect, so it can reduce the heat island effect. And the nice thing about nature-based solutions compared to engineering solutions is engineering solution provides only a solution to a single problem. That is the only benefit it provides. But nature provides many benefits as in the form of ecosystem services. So nature-based solutions not only provide solution against flood, but it also provides us a series of other core benefits like recreational opportunities. Because if you look around Colombo, I think we have been doing fairly well in that, creating urban spaces around wetlands where people can go and walk or socialize, etc. What you see here is the Badagana wetland, and the other photograph shows the Deer Saru in Talawatugoda, but we have series of such wetland parks around Colombo, which is a fairly good investment. like there is a saying that when one opens a close to a school, you can close a door to a prison. Likewise, when you invest on creating urban spaces, you can prevent, you can have a healthy population rather than investing on hospitals to treat those people who are getting sick. So this kind of recreational spaces provide people to go and engage in exercise and so on, so that while I was talking about communicable disease as an issue in urban centers, non-communicable diseases such as hypertension, diabetes are even bigger problem today in urban centers because the sedentary lifestyles we lead. So these provides us a way to deal with that kind of challenges. And then secondly, wetlands cool cities. Wetlands can remove dust and it can remove carbon dioxide and purify our air. Wetlands also have the ability to trap toxins and remove various types of unhealthy components from water. And wetlands are also haven for biodiversity. Even though Colombo wetlands have been degraded to some extent, we still have globally endangered species like fishing cats or otters and so on still in our wetlands, and they also have a lot of endemic plants and some endemic animals as well. And they also provide us new economic opportunities to provide new livelihoods and so on. And the value of Colombo wetlands in terms of ecosystem have been estimated to be around 16 to 18 billion rupees per annum. This looks like a big number, but I think bulk of this value comes from wetlands' ability to prevent floods. The funny thing about ecosystem services is when they are providing those services, you don't feel it. But if you remove the Colombo wetlands, the amount of damage that will be caused by floods will be colossal. So ecosystem services, while you are enjoying it, you probably wouldn't appreciate it, but once lost, only you will begin to understand it, but it will be too late to address it, because these are things that we have to understand and address at the same time. Even though they are providing so much benefits, this is the fate of Colombo wetlands. Over the past 4 decades or so, we've lost 40% of our wetlands, and we continue to lose 1.2% per annum. So I think the challenge ahead of us as designers, or ahead of you as designers, is to how do we treat our wetlands better. I am going to point out just 3 very important things that we should focus on. One is preventing habitat fragmentation. You can see in this map there are wetlands which are separated by roads, and when we build roads, we don't think about animals that have to cross these wetlands. So if we block their movement path, they have to inevitably cross over roads, and the result is something like this. We see a lot of animals being killed by accidents. This is a fishing cat, a globally endangered animal, killed due to car accident. There are lots of other animals who are dying, but we can very easily solve these problems by changing our designs a little bit, and when we build a road, we can allow them small corridors, we can build them into this to make sure that they also can move around their wetland habitats without coming onto road surfaces and finding themselves in a situation like that. The second thing that I would like to point out is when you look around Colombo, we have this kind of lots of open, nice reservoir type wetland. Parliament, this is of course the Parliament Lake. But when you look at a wetland, its diversity depends on the diversity of wetlands itself. So if you look at Colombo wetlands, you have open water, you have short grass covered wetlands like marshes, then you have tall grass covered wetlands. Each of these provide different types of habitats for different species. So when you compare Parliament Lake with Talangamatak, which I'm showing you here, and if you go and look at the types of things you can see, Parliament Lake is more like a desert compared to Talangamatak is like a forest, because very few things can be seen in the Parliament Lake because it's a uniform habitat that we have created. Whereas if you go to Thalangama Tank, you have open water, you have floating vegetation, you have some meadow type, marsh type habitats. Each one of these different habitats support different species, and therefore it's a very rich wetland. So the second thing we can think about is not converting everything into open pond or reservoir type systems, but maintaining this heterogeneity is very important to maintain diversity when we design cities. Thirdly, releasing, now the current trend is more and more urbanization leads to more and more high-rise buildings, a lot of people living in a very limited space. Now, if you take a person, per capita use of water is about 130 to 150 liters per person. We only use about 5 liters of that for our consumption, for drinking and cooking. Rest of it is for bathing, washing cars, watering our gardens, etc. But when you look at the water that we are using, once we use it, they become wastewater. There is gray water, there is black water. And when we release them into the environment, it has effect, because what we take, for instance, we take a lot of medicine. And the medicine gets metabolized in our body, and the metabolic products are released with our urine or feces. Now, a study done in England shows that people who take contraceptives, which is female sex hormone, gets metabolized inside the body, and when you urinate, the metabolites go into the water, and if you release them into the wetlands, the fish are exposed to it, and fish are becoming increasingly feminine. So the sex ratios are changing, which is something that we do not connect. So basically, when you release wastewater, you have to first treat them and release, especially when we're in urban centers. It's very important for all our high-rise buildings have some level of treatment before we release them into the environment. So these are a few things that I would like to offer food for thought. When you people design urban cities, I think we can use nature much more to make our cities more resilient and more sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Devaka, for elaborating on some of the concerns. So we don't have much time, but we'll try to take maybe, I'll try to frame one question to sort of address all of our topics and how we are faced with this sort of colossal task of reconciling the industrial development with environmental resilience. And architect Upendra highlighted the role that the National Physical Plan can play in this and what architects can play in this. And what I felt was we can identify maybe some intervention points, particularly that architects can address. Dr. Ranil talked about analog forestry, and you mentioned in your slide about architectural structures. So my question, particularly taking from Professor Devaka's presentation about avoiding habitat fragmentation, that's probably something that the National Physical Plan can address. So Dr. Ranil, you spoke about architectural structures that can also be a part of that analog forestry equation. Do you have any, what did you imagine? What is the requirement there? And also, as a follow-up to that, architect Upendra, how can we address something like that at the policy level? And who are the collaborators? Who needs to collaborate for that?
My thinking is that we have to learn to collaborate with other professionals, mainly those who are dealing with the environment. We need a top-down, bottom-up approach. At the moment, what we have is a top-down approach. We think that we know and we deliver. I think Professor Lim talked about it. We have to be more interactive, listen. That's part of this empathetic approach which we are trained to do. In doing so, we deal with professionals at a pragmatic, practical level. And Sri Lanka is a unique example because most countries, the state is very rich. State can do things. I think in our lifetime, with the economy that we have to think of public-private partnership. So whatever that we do, we have to look at how we can fund them, how we can work as teams. Private sector will have to step in big time. Especially, I know a professor is working with wildlife conservation, especially elephants. With the Mahavali development, we had 30,000 elephants, now down to 6,000 elephants within a matter of 30 years. So there is a lot to be done. So I think most architectural students should take this to their heart, that we are not only arbiters of good taste. We are here to serve the public, and public, not only human, but also flora and fauna and the biodiversity which you guys were talking about. We are there to respect all of that. So the future will be partnerships, foreign funded or local funded, but we have to think in terms of business as well. I think you brought that aspect into the discussion, that whatever we do, there is a cost. Nothing is going to happen by chance. And you talked about that, yeah.
And not only is there a cost to this thing, there is a potential. And that is, if we look at ecosystem services, the wealth there is phenomenal. It's bigger than the GDP of the whole industrialized West. It's about 3 times. We have to learn how to capitalize on it. We have to learn how to use modern science and modern knowledge to capitalize on the great wealth of ecosystem services and use that basically for the right kind of development, not this development that we've been pushed along to just consume, and especially fossil as the goal. We have to move away. So we have to change the paradigm of development. We have to recognize the potential that we have and use that potential basically to create the new capital that's going to take us out of this debt. Otherwise, we'll be forever stuck in this debt for the next few generations to come. Here is an opportunity for us to escape, and I believe that we should take it now.
Right, thank you. So we can take maybe one question from the audience. Do we have a question? There's a question over there. Yes.
My question is to Dr. Anil Senayaka. Doctor, now have you approached the government and introduced your new concepts and about biodiversity and earth restoration as a means of attracting investment to your concept? And does the government really understand what you're saying?
Well,
those are my questions.
Thank you. It's a good question. See, government, what is it? It's a group of individuals, people like you and me. That's the government. If the people like you and me are educated, sensitive to our needs, and willing to do something for our house, I'm an ecologist. Ecology means study of the house, our house that we live in, the environment. Architects, you build the structures to live within the ecosystem. Now, we understand this, but the leadership, as you pointed out, if they do not understand the potential of what's available to them to manage and take us forward, then what we have is nothing but a failure in leadership. That is where the youth of this country has to come together. You are the leaders now. The old leaders have failed completely. Look at where we are. They have failed us. They have brought us to be beggars in the world stage just by borrowing stupidly so that they can make commissions or whatever they do with that money. Now, the knowledge is there. We have the knowledge on how to capitalize. And all this thinking, analog forestry, primary ecosystem services, began in Sri Lanka and came from Sri Lanka and now is going out to the world. Our politicians can't see that, but other people, sensitive people can. And that's why, to you, the youth, who's stepping out into this country, you have a huge opportunity. There is a huge danger, but there is a huge opportunity. Use your knowledge to ensure that this country can escape from the debt trap that the politicians have taken us into. I have just shown you a way out of it. And if any true leader steps out who can understand and take us out of this, then we should all be thankful for that kind of leadership to take us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ranil. So I believe there are takeaway messages from our panel to our audience. Me as an architect as well, I took a lot away from the discussion, particularly the focus that we have to give to the relationship between, the soil and air, the earth and sky is, I think, a strong message to take away for architects. So thank you very much to our panelists, Architect Upendra, Dr. Ranil, and Professor Devaka. So that's the end of our panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
We say thank you very much to our moderator and panelists. We invite you to please remain on stage for a couple of minutes more as we have tokens of appreciation that we would like to present. To do the honors, I'd now like to invite the President of SLIA, Architect Rohana Bandara Herat, to join us up. And we'd also like to invite Professor Jimmy Lim to please join us up as well, as we thank the speaker, the moderator, as well as the panelists for the first segment of our national conference. Once again, let me remind you about who has been on the panel here for the very first segment. We were delighted to be joined today by Professor Devaka Veerakone, Dr. Ranil Senanaika, Architect Upendra Ramdenya as the board of speakers. We also had Architect Kalpani Jayatilaka, who very capably moderated this discussion. We have our keynote speaker, Professor Jimmy Lin, joining us as well. We now invite the tokens of appreciation to please be brought forward as we present them to the panelists, the moderator, and our keynote speaker. We invite the tokens of appreciation to please be brought forward. Our dignitaries are on stage. All right, so we'd now like to begin by inviting our president to please present this token to Professor Jimmy Lim. We have our president presenting it to Professor Devaka Veerakone, and then we move on. We have one for Dr. Ranil Senanaika. Let's put our hands together, ladies and gentlemen. This is our keynote speaker, Professor Jimmy Lim. We invite the next few tokens to please be brought forward as well. Let's put our hands together for Dr. Ranil Senanaika. And now let's put our hands together for Architect Upendra Ramdenya. We have yet another token now, this time for our wonderful moderator of the discussion, Architect Kalpani Jayatilaka. Let's put our hands together for her, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, we'd now like to say thank you to all of the dignitaries on stage. You may feel free to take your seats in the audience. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we've come to the end of our very first segment on resilience.